Cale Arvid had always considered himself an ordinary man. Growing up on Earth, he lived a quiet life in the bustling city of New Chicago, working as a trade negotiator for one of the largest interstellar corporations. His days were filled with meetings, contracts, and endless cups of coffee. Nothing about his existence hinted at adventure or drama, until the day everything changed. It began during what should have been a routine negotiation aboard the orbital station Aurora Nexus. Representatives from dozens of alien species gathered there daily to discuss commerce, treaties, and alliances. For Cale, these events were predictable, almost boring. He knew how to navigate diplomatic waters. He'd done it countless times before. But this time, something went terribly wrong. The Valith delegation arrived late, their shimmering, crystalline forms drawing stares from everyone in the room. The Valith were known across the galaxy for their ethereal beauty and advanced technology, but also for their aloofness. They rarely interacted with other species unless absolutely necessary. Their presence alone commanded attention, and when they entered the chamber, even the most seasoned diplomats fell silent. Cale's team was tasked with finalizing a resource-sharing agreement between Earth and the Valith Empire. It was supposed to be straightforward. Exchange rare minerals mined from Earth's moon for access to Valith energy crystals, which powered starships faster than anything humanity had ever developed. However, tensions quickly escalated when misunderstandings arose over technical terms in the treaty. One misinterpreted phrase led to another, and soon voices were raised. The Valith ambassador, a towering figure named Zinthar, grew visibly agitated. His crystalline body pulsed faintly with light, a sign of irritation among his kind. Before Cale could intervene, Zinthar declared that the negotiations were over. "If your species cannot comprehend basic respect," he said coldly, "then perhaps we require a more personal assurance of cooperation." Before anyone could respond, Zinthar turned his glowing gaze directly onto Cale. "You," he said, pointing a slender finger. "You will come with us." Panic surged through Cale. "What? Why me?" he stammered, looking around for support. But no one stepped forward. His colleagues exchanged uneasy glances, clearly unwilling to challenge the powerful alien. Within moments, 2 Valith guards flanked Cale, their crystalline armor gleaming ominously. Resistance seemed futile, and just like that, Cale found himself dragged onto a sleek Valith starship. The interior was unlike anything he'd seen before. Smooth walls that shifted colors gently, soft hums resonating through the air, and an overwhelming sense of being watched. Despite his fear, Cale couldn't help but marvel at the craftsmanship. Everything exuded elegance and precision, qualities that only deepened his unease. What did they want with him? Hours later, Cale was escorted into a grand chamber where Zinthar awaited alongside several others, including a striking young woman who stood slightly apart from the group. Her crystalline skin sparkled faintly, and her silver eyes seemed to pierce right through him. This, Cale learned, was Princess Lyria, the youngest daughter of the Valith Emperor and Empress. "Human," Zinthar began without preamble. "You have been selected to marry our princess." Cale blinked, certain he'd misheard. "Marry? Wait, what? That's insane." Zinthar ignored his outburst. "Your union will strengthen ties between our peoples. Refusal is not an option." Lyria didn't say a word throughout the exchange. She simply stared at Cale, her expression unreadable. If she shared his shock or dismay, she gave no indication. Instead, she turned away abruptly and exited the chamber, leaving Cale reeling. As the reality of his situation sank in, Cale felt anger bubbling beneath the surface. How dare they treat him like some bargaining chip? He wasn't royalty, nor did he possess any special talents. To them, he was nothing more than a tool, a means to an end. Yet despite his fury, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more going on here than met the eye. Over the next few days, Cale tried to reason with his captors, pleading for a way out of the arrangement. Each attempt ended in failure. The Valith remained unmoved, insisting that tradition dictated such unions. Meanwhile, Lyria continued to avoid him entirely. When they did cross paths, she avoided eye contact, retreating further into herself. But strange things started happening aboard the ship. Shadows moved where there shouldn't be any. Lights flickered unpredictably. And then there were the dreams. Vivid, haunting visions that left Cale drenched in sweat each morning. In these dreams, he saw glimpses of alien landscapes, heard whispers in languages he didn't understand, and felt an inexplicable connection to Lyria. Something or someone was trying to tell him something, though Cale didn't know it yet. His journey was only beginning. The Vaylith homeworld loomed closer with each passing hour, its twin suns casting long shadows across the void. Whatever fate awaited him there, one thing was certain: Cale's life would never be the same again. The Vaylith starship descended through thick clouds of shimmering mist, revealing a world unlike anything Cale had ever imagined. Vaylith Prime stretched out before him, a breathtaking expanse of crystalline spires that reached toward twin suns, their surfaces glowing with an inner light. Rivers of liquid crystal wound through valleys reflecting the sky in dazzling hues. It was beautiful, but there was something unsettling about its perfection, as if the planet itself were hiding secrets beneath its gleaming surface. Cale's arrival at the Imperial Palace was met with cold indifference. The Emperor and Empress, tall, regal figures whose crystalline forms radiated authority, greeted him briefly before dismissing him to attend other matters. Their lack of warmth only deepened Cale's resentment. He felt like little more than a pawn, a human token in their grand game of interstellar politics. Lyria, too, seemed distant, her presence marked by silence rather than hostility. She avoided eye contact during formal introductions and retreated to her chambers shortly after. The palace itself was both awe-inspiring and oppressive. Its towering walls sparkled faintly, alive with shifting patterns that seemed almost sentient. Servants moved silently through corridors adorned with intricate carvings, their movements precise and mechanical. Everywhere Kyle turned, he sensed eyes watching him, not just from the servants or guards, but from the very structure of the palace itself. Whispers echoed faintly in empty halls, though no one appeared to be speaking. Lights dimmed and brightened unpredictably, casting eerie shadows across the floor. At first, Cale tried to focus on practical concerns. He reasoned that understanding the Vaylith culture might help him find a way out of this arrangement. But every attempt to engage with Lyria ended in failure. She spent most of her time locked away in private chambers or wandering secluded parts of the palace, leaving Cale isolated and frustrated. Still, his curiosity grew when he noticed subtle changes in her behavior. Occasionally, she would glance at him with an unreadable expression, as if sensing something she couldn't quite put into words. One evening, unable to sleep due to another vivid dream, Cale decided to explore the palace library. He hoped to distract himself and perhaps uncover information about the Vaylith people that could explain why they had chosen him for such an extraordinary task. The library was vast, filled with floating shelves of translucent books that hummed softly as he approached. Many were written in languages he couldn't decipher, but some contained images and symbols that caught his attention. It was among these ancient texts that Cale stumbled upon fragments of lore hinting at a prophecy tied to the union between a human and a Vaylith heir. At first he dismissed it as superstition, a relic of a bygone era, but as he read further, details began to align eerily with his own situation. The prophecy spoke of two souls from different worlds whose bond would awaken dormant powers capable of either saving or destroying entire civilizations. Could this really apply to him? And if so, what role did Lyria play? Determined to learn more, Cale returned to the library several nights in a row, piecing together scraps of knowledge from dusty archives. Each discovery brought new questions. Why had the Vaylith monarchy kept this prophecy hidden? Did they truly believe Cale was part of it, or were they manipulating him for their own gain? More troubling still, he couldn't shake the feeling that Lyria knew more than she let on. His suspicions deepened when he encountered Lyria unexpectedly one night. She stood alone in a secluded garden, bathed in the soft glow of the twin moons. Her crystalline skin shimmered faintly, and for the first time Kyle saw vulnerability in her silver eyes. Before he could speak, she turned sharply, clearly startled. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice tinged with irritation but also something else. Fear? I couldn't sleep, Kyle admitted, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "I didn't mean to intrude." Lyria hesitated, then sighed. "You're not supposed to be here." "Neither are you," Kyle countered gently. "Why do you keep avoiding me?" For a moment she looked as though she might walk away. Instead, she sank onto a bench, her shoulders slumping slightly. "Because I don't want to hurt you," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Kyle frowned. "Hurt me? What do you mean?" Lyria hesitated again, her gaze dropping to the ground. "There are things about me, about my family, that you don't understand. Things I can't control." She paused, then added bitterly, "They forced this marriage because they think I'm weak. Because they believe your presence will stabilize me." Kale's mind raced. "Stabilize you? From what?" Lyria clenched her fists, her crystalline skin pulsing faintly with light. "My powers. They've been growing stronger lately, and I'm afraid of what might happen if I lose control." Before Kale could respond, the air around them seemed to shift. A low hum filled the garden, and the crystals embedded in the walls began to glow brighter. Lyria gasped, clutching her head as if in pain. Instinctively, Kale reached out to steady her, but the moment his hand touched hers, a surge of energy coursed through him. Images flashed before his eyes. Alien landscapes, shadowy figures, and a sense of impending doom. When the vision faded, Lyria pulled away, her expression a mixture of shock and fear. "You felt that too," she whispered. "That shouldn't have happened." Kyle stared at her, his heart pounding. "What was that?" She shook her head, visibly shaken. "I don't know, but it means we're connected somehow. Maybe the prophecy is real." The revelation left them both silent, the weight of the unknown pressing down on them. For the first time, Kale realized that Lyria wasn't just a reluctant bride. She was trapped in a web of expectations and fears far beyond his comprehension. And while he still resented being dragged into this situation, he couldn't deny the strange pull he felt toward her. As dawn broke over the palace, painting its spires in golden light, Kale found himself wondering how much deeper the secrets of Valeth Prime ran. Whatever answers lay hidden within the crystal walls, one thing was certain: his fate, and Lyria's, was intertwined in ways neither of them fully understood yet. Kale's days at the Crystal Palace became a blur of unease and discovery. Each morning he woke with fragments of vivid dreams lingering in his mind, dreams that felt more like memories of places he had never been. The visions always ended, abruptly, leaving him disoriented and restless. At first he tried to dismiss them as stress-induced hallucinations, but deep down, he knew they were connected to Lyria and the strange energy he'd felt when their hands touched in the garden. Lyria, too, seemed affected, though she still kept her distance during the day, avoiding formal gatherings and public appearances. Kale noticed subtle changes in her behavior. She would occasionally glance at him across the grand halls, her silver eyes filled with something akin to curiosity, or perhaps fear. It was as if she were wrestling with conflicting emotions, torn between distrust and an unspoken need for understanding. Their shared moment in the garden hadn't resolved anything, but it had planted a seed of trust between them. Slowly, tentatively, they began meeting in secret. Late at night, when the palace grew quiet and the glowing spires dimmed slightly, Kyle would find Lyria waiting in the library or wandering among the crystalline gardens. They spoke cautiously at first, exchanging guarded words about their lives before this forced arrangement. Over time, however, their conversations deepened. "I've always hated this place," Lyria admitted one evening as they walked along a shimmering pathway lined with luminescent flowers. "It's beautiful on the surface, but underneath—" She trailed off, her voice heavy with unspoken meaning. "Underneath what?" Kyle prompted gently. Lyria hesitated, then sighed. Underneath, it's hollow. Everything here is built on secrets and lies. My parents. They don't care about alliances or peace, they only care about power. Kyle frowned. But why go through all this trouble? Why drag me into it? Because of the prophecy, Lyria said softly. They think your presence will awaken my full potential, that together we'll fulfill some ancient destiny. And do you believe them? Kale asked. Lyria shook her head. I didn't used to. But now, she glanced at him, her expression conflicted. Now I'm not so sure. Her admission unsettled Kyle, but it also strengthened his resolve to uncover the truth. Together they delved deeper into the palace archives, searching for clues about the prophecy and its origins. What they found both fascinated and terrified them. According to the texts, the union of a human and a Valith heir wasn't just symbolic. It was meant to trigger a transformation within the royal bloodline, unlocking latent psychic abilities tied to the very fabric of the universe. As they pieced together the fragments of lore, Kale began experiencing stronger visions. These weren't fleeting glimpses anymore. They were immersive, pulling him into alien worlds and showing him glimpses of catastrophic events. In one vision, he saw twin suns collapsing into darkness, engulfing entire planets in shadow. In another, he witnessed armies clashing beneath shattered skies while a lone figure stood amidst the chaos, radiating light. Each vision left Kale drained, but they also brought clarity. He realized that the shadows he'd seen moving in the palace corridors weren't figments of his imagination. They were echoes of something far older and more powerful than anyone had let on. And Lyria's powers, which she feared losing control of, were likely the key to unraveling the mystery. One fateful night, everything came to a head. Kale and Lyria had ventured into a restricted wing of the palace, drawn by faint vibrations, emanating from a massive crystal embedded in the wall. The air around it hummed with energy, and as they approached, Kyle felt a familiar surge of connection, a pull that seemed to originate from deep within his chest. This is it, Lyria whispered, her voice trembling. The Heartstone. It's the source of our people's power, and maybe yours too. Before they could examine it further, the ground beneath them trembled violently. Lights flickered and alarms blared throughout the palace. Guards appeared moments later, their crystalline armor gleaming ominously in the dim light. Behind them stood Zinthar, his face grim. You shouldn't be here, Zinthar said coldly, fixing Kale with a piercing gaze. This area is forbidden. We deserve answers. Kale shot back, stepping protectively in front of Lyria. Why are you keeping us in the dark? What does this stone have to do with us? Zinthar hesitated, then sighed heavily. Very well. If you must know, the Heartstone is tied to the prophecy. It amplifies psychic energy, and your presence here has begun awakening forces we cannot fully control. What kind of forces? Lyria demanded, her voice rising. The kind that could destroy everything, Zinthar replied bluntly. Your powers are growing faster than anticipated, Princess. If left unchecked, they could destabilize the Empire, and beyond. Kale turned to Lyria, who looked pale and shaken. Is that true? He asked quietly. She nodded slowly. I've felt it building inside me like a storm waiting to break. For a long moment, silence hung between them. Then Kale squared his shoulders, determination hardening his features. We can't run from this, he said firmly. If there's even a chance we're part of something bigger, we owe it to ourselves, and everyone else, to figure it out. Lyria stared at him, surprise flickering in her silver eyes. For the first time, Kyle saw a glimmer of hope in her expression. You're serious, she murmured. Dead serious, Kyle replied. Whatever happens next, we face it together. With that, they made a pact. No matter how dangerous the path ahead might be, they would confront the truth, not just for themselves, but for the countless lives depending on them. As they left the restricted wing under Zinthar's watchful eye, Kale couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing on the brink of something monumental. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, but the picture they formed was far from clear. One thing, however, was certain. Kyle and Lyria's journey was no longer just about surviving an unwanted marriage. It was about uncovering the secrets buried beneath the Crystal Palace and deciding whether they had the strength to change the course of history. The days following their discovery of the Heartstone were tense and charged with uncertainty. Kyle and Lyria knew they couldn't rely on Zinthar or the royal family to guide them, not when their intentions seemed so deeply tied to control and manipulation. Every decision, every move they made felt like walking a tightrope over an abyss. The stakes had never been higher, and yet, Kale found himself oddly calm. Perhaps it was because he finally understood what he was fighting for, or, rather, who Lyria, too, had changed. Gone was the distant, reluctant princess who had initially avoided him at all costs. In her place stood someone determined to take charge of her own destiny. She began practicing meditative techniques to better manage her growing powers, often spending hours alone in quiet corners of the palace, focusing on controlling the surges of energy that threatened to overwhelm her. Kale joined her whenever possible, offering support and encouragement. Though he didn't possess psychic abilities himself, his presence seemed to help ground her, creating a balance neither of them fully understood, but both desperately needed. Their bond grew stronger with each passing day, though it remained fragile. They still argued, sometimes fiercely, but these disagreements only served to clarify their shared goals. Kale pushed Lyria to question everything she had been taught about her role as a princess, while Lyria challenged Kale's skepticism, reminding him that not everything could be explained by logic alone. Together, they formed an unlikely partnership, united by circumstance but bound by something deeper. One evening, as they sat together in the crystalline gardens, Lyria broke the silence. "Do you ever wonder if we're making a mistake?" she asked softly, her gaze fixed on the glowing spires above. Kyle hesitated before answering. "All the time," he admitted. "But I also think about what happens if we don't try. If we let fear stop us from finding out the truth." Lyria nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. "You're right. We can't keep running from this, but where do we even start?" Kale leaned forward, his voice low but steady. "We need allies, people who believe in what we're trying to do, and who aren't afraid to stand against the monarchy if necessary." It was a risky idea, but one they couldn't ignore. Over the next few days, they began discreetly reaching out to members of the palace staff and lower-ranking officials. Many were hesitant at first, wary of the consequences, of defying the emperor and empress. But others listened, drawn to the sincerity in Kale and Lyria's voices. Slowly, a small network of supporters began to form, united by a shared desire for change. Among them was a young Valith technician named Silva, whose expertise in palace systems proved invaluable. She revealed hidden passageways and surveillance, blind spots allowing Kale and Lyria to move through the palace undetected. Another ally was an elderly historian named Thalos, who provided insights into the ancient texts Kale had uncovered earlier. Together, they pieced together more details about the prophecy and its implications. According to Thalos, the union between a human and a Valith heir wasn't just meant to awaken psychic powers, it was supposed to act as a catalyst for unity across species. "Your connection is symbolic," he explained during one of their secret meetings. "A reminder that differences can be bridged, that cooperation is possible. But it comes at a cost. Those who resist the message will fight back, and they won't hesitate to destroy anything or anyone that stands in their way." The warning weighed heavily on Kale and Lyria, but it also reinforced their resolve. They knew they couldn't face this challenge alone. With Silva's help, they organized a covert meeting with representatives from various factions within the Empire, including disillusioned nobles, rebellious workers, and even emissaries from neighboring planets. The gathering took place deep beneath the palace in an abandoned chamber illuminated only by faint, bioluminescent moss. As Kale addressed the group, he felt a surge of nerves, but also pride. For the first time, he saw hope in the eyes of those around him. "We've been told lies," he said, his voice echoing off the stone walls. We've been manipulated, used, and controlled. But we have a chance to change that, to create something better, together. When Lyria spoke next, her words carried a weight no one could deny. I'm not asking you to follow me because of my title or my bloodline, she said firmly. I'm asking you to fight for a future where no one has to live in fear, where power isn't hoarded by a few at the expense of many. Her speech ignited a spark among the attendees. Plans were made, strategies devised, and alliances solidified. By the end of the meeting, Kyle and Lyria had earned the loyalty of a diverse coalition determined to overthrow the corrupt monarchy and establish a new order, one rooted in transparency and equality. But their newfound momentum came at a price. News of their activities reached the Emperor and Empress sooner than expected. Within hours, palace guards descended upon the underground chamber, forcing Kale, Lyria, and their allies to flee through narrow tunnels. The escape was harrowing, with laser blasts searing the air behind them and alarms blaring throughout the complex. When they finally emerged into the open, chaos awaited. The rebellion had begun. Riots erupted across Valith Prime, fueled by years of pent-up frustration and anger. Protesters clashed with royal forces in the streets, while ships from neighboring planets arrived to lend support or seize opportunities for themselves. Amid the turmoil, Kale and Lyria became symbols of resistance, their images broadcast across the galaxy. Some hailed them as heroes, while others condemned them as traitors. Despite the danger, Kale refused to back down. He and Lyria worked tirelessly to rally their supporters, coordinating attacks and spreading messages of hope. Yet even as victories mounted, the toll of leadership began to show. Lyria struggled to contain her powers, which flared unpredictably during moments of stress. Kale, meanwhile, wrestled with guilt over the lives being lost in their name. One night, after a particularly brutal skirmish, Kale found Lyria sitting alone atop a crumbling tower, gazing out at the burning city below. Her crystalline skin shimmered, faintly, reflecting the orange glow of distant fires. She looked exhausted, but resolute. We're doing the right thing, aren't we? She asked quietly, without turning to look at him. Kale joined her, resting a hand on her shoulder. I don't know, he admitted. But I do know that giving up isn't an option. Not now. Lyria nodded, leaning into his touch. Then we keep going, no matter what. And so they did. Against all odds, Kale and Lyria pressed forward, driven by a shared vision of a brighter future. The road ahead would be long and fraught, with challenges, but they faced it together, two souls from different worlds bound by fate and forged in fire. Whatever lay beyond the horizon, they would meet it side by side. The final days of the rebellion were a whirlwind of chaos and determination. Kale and Lyria stood at the heart of it all, their bond stronger than ever, as they led their coalition toward what felt like an impossible victory. The palace, once a symbol of opulence and control, now lay besieged by those who sought to dismantle its oppressive foundations. Fires raged in the streets below, casting flickering shadows across the crystalline spires that had long dominated Valith Prime's skyline. Yet amidst the destruction there was also hope, a fragile but undeniable spark igniting across the empire. Kyle and Lyria knew the battle wasn't just about reclaiming territory or overthrowing rulers. It was about exposing the truth. With every step closer to the throne room, they grew more certain that the Emperor and Empress had been using fear and manipulation to maintain their grip on power. The Heartstone, the very source of Lyria's powers, had been corrupted over centuries, its energy harnessed not for unity, but for domination. If they could confront the royal family and reveal this corruption to the galaxy, they might finally break the cycle of oppression. Their journey to the throne room was far from easy. Royal guards patrolled the halls with ruthless efficiency, their crystalline armor gleaming menacingly under dim lights. Kale and Lyria moved cautiously, guided by Silva's knowledge of hidden passageways and supported by loyal rebels, fighting diversionary battles elsewhere in the palace. Each corridor brought new challenges, locked doors, ambushes, and moments when Lyria's power surged uncontrollably. illuminating their position to enemies nearby. But through it all, they pressed forward, driven by a shared purpose. When they finally reached the grand chamber where the Emperor and Empress awaited them, the air crackled with tension. The massive double doors opened with a low groan, revealing a cavernous space dominated by the towering form of the Heartstone. Its surface pulsed erratically, glowing brighter and darker in unpredictable rhythms. Standing before it, the Emperor and Empress watched silently, their crystalline bodies radiating authority and unease. "You dare challenge us?" the Emperor said, his voice cold and commanding. "Do you truly believe your rebellion will succeed?" Kale stepped forward, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "We're not here to destroy. We're here to expose the lies you've built this empire on, to show everyone the truth about the Heartstone, and about you." The Empress sneered. "Truth? You think you understand what we've sacrificed to keep this empire strong? Without our guidance, without the power of the Heartstone, chaos would consume everything." "No," Lyria interjected, her voice trembling but resolute. "What consumes us is your greed, your refusal to share power. You've twisted the prophecy for your own gain, using my abilities and others to control instead of unite." For a moment, silence hung heavy in the room. Then the Emperor laughed, a sharp, brittle sound that echoed off the walls. "Prophecy? Unity? These are childish notions. Power is the only thing that matters." As he spoke, the Heartstone flared violently, sending waves of energy rippling through the chamber. Lyria gasped, clutching her head as pain seared through her mind. Kale instinctively reached for her, steadying her as she fought to regain control. But something extraordinary happened next. The surge of energy didn't overwhelm her. Instead, it seemed to flow between them, binding them together in a way neither had experienced before. Lyria straightened, her silver eyes blazing with newfound clarity. "Enough," she said, her voice ringing out with authority. "This ends now." With that, she extended her hands toward the Heartstone, channeling her powers into its core. The stone reacted instantly, its erratic pulses steadying as streams of light shot outward, flooding the chamber and beyond with blinding brilliance. Images began to appear within the light. Visions of the Emperor and Empress manipulating the Heartstone's energy, exploiting its power to suppress dissent and maintain control. The truth spread across the entire empire, broadcast through every communication network and displayed on every screen. The effect was immediate. Across Valeth Prime, citizens stopped in their tracks, staring at the revelations unfolding before them. Even soldiers loyal to the monarchy paused, unsure of how to proceed. In that moment, the foundation of the empire crumbled, not through force but through exposure. The Emperor and Empress fell to their knees, their faces etched with shock and despair. They tried to protest, to justify their actions, but their words carried no weight against the overwhelming evidence. Guards lowered their weapons, and allies among the nobility stepped forward to declare their support for change. As the dust settled, Kale turned to Lyria, his expression a mixture of relief and awe. "You did it," he said softly. "You really did it." She shook her head, smiling faintly. "We did it, together." In the weeks that followed, the empire underwent a profound transformation. The Emperor and Empress abdicated, retreating into exile while a provisional government took shape. Representatives from all walks of life, workers, scholars, rebels, and even former nobles, came together to draft a new constitution, one rooted in transparency and cooperation. Lyria refused to take the throne, choosing instead to serve as an advisor dedicated to rebuilding trust and fostering unity. Kale remained by her side, his role evolving from reluctant participant to trusted leader. Together, they traveled across Valeth Prime and beyond, meeting with leaders of other species to forge alliances based on mutual respect rather than exploitation. Their union became a symbol of hope, not because of prophecy but because of the choices they made and the sacrifices they endured. Yet even as they worked tirelessly to heal old wounds, Kale and Lyria found time for quieter moments. One evening, As twin suns dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, they stood together atop a rebuilt tower overlooking the city. Below them, lights twinkled like stars, signaling the beginning of a brighter future. "Do you think we'll ever get used to this?" Kyle asked, gesturing to the bustling world around them. Lyria chuckled softly. "Probably not, but maybe that's a good thing. It means we'll never stop trying to make things better." Kale nodded, reaching for her hand. "Whatever happens next, we'll face it together." And so they did. From the ashes of conflict rose a new era, an era defined not by fear or domination but by collaboration and understanding. Kyle and Lyria's journey had begun with resentment and uncertainty, but it ended with love, courage, and an unshakable belief in the possibility of change. As they gazed out at the world they had helped reshape, they knew their story was just the beginning of something greater.